we get our founders to focus on just the top three, we find phenomenal outcomes for them within a couple of years. And that's where this whole consulting first approach started.
Welcome to a brand new episode of the M&A Mastermind podcast presented by Cornerstone International Alliance. I am your host, Nick Olsen. On this show, I get the opportunity to talk with the brightest minds in lower middle market M&A. Together, we discuss industry intelligence, deal management, shared successes, specialized expertise, and much more. If you serve the small to medium-sized business owner, this show will offer you tactics and insights you can use and implement now to become a master in M&A. Welcome to a brand new episode of the M&A Mastermind podcast. We have a very special guest today. He is our newest member at Cornerstone International Alliance, founder and CEO of RBA, a leading M&A advisory firm dedicated exclusively to the restoration industry. My guest has spent over 18 years of his career in the space, which truly makes him an expert in this industry and helping business owners in that space to successfully sell their businesses. He went to college on a tennis scholarship, studied in absolute silence for 20 days at a monastery. Vegetarian, not vegan. He loves cheese, especially a good UK cheddar. Please welcome my guest today, Gokul Padmanabhan. Gokul, how you doing?
Nick, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
All right. So how did you last 20 days without talking?
It was hard.
You don't know how you did it. Really happy to have you on the show today. Really excited about our conversation.
Every once in a while.
What's that?
I tend to do not so bright things every once in a while.
Hey, that's how you learn. But really appreciate you joining the show. And today we're going to talk about, your approach at working with your clients. It's more of a consulting first approach. What that means, what that looks like, and why it's important in your success. And we're going to talk a little bit about the restoration industry as well. I know our listeners would love to learn the nuances and ins and outs of that industry based on your experience and expertise. So let's dive into it. What is this? You built your firm around this consulting first approach. Can you explain what that means and why it is so critical to your success in M&A?
Yeah. So, before I got into M&A, I had my own firm. I had a home services company that I kind of rolled up a couple of companies and exited. And so when I approach deals, I always look at it from an owner's perspective, and especially in a kind of blue collar construction field that we're in. What I noticed doing this over and over again is, almost 80% of the people that are calling us, they want to exit, but the business is not ready to exit, right? So then I didn't feel like just leaving them high and dry, all practical purposes. So then I just started consulting with them because I always think as an entrepreneur more than as an M&A advisor, just so used to it over the years. So when I put myself in their shoes, I'm like, hey, they want to exit. The business is not ready. Somebody's got to help them. So I just started just helping a few people, and it just grew. And then it just became the fabric and the DNA of what we do, because that 80% of the people that call us, they're ready to sell. The business is not ready to sell. So what are we going to do with them, right? And that's why this whole consultative approach came. It just started organically, and it just kept growing and growing and growing. And if you look at our deals now, some of the biggest deals that we get every year has come out of consulting with that owner for 12 to 18 months. And valuations go up too when we do that, right? So valuations are going up 20, 30, 40% over 2 years. When we, just help them with the stuff that we all know how to do. Get it buyer ready, so to speak. Yep.
Right. And they're supposed to be doing it all along, but, maybe you're more focused on just the ins and outs of the business and, being in the business, not working on the business. And, how does this approach solve for the problem that we all see far too often and more than we'd like to, is selling when it's too late? So you're working with these clients. You've identified value. You've identified maybe the shortcomings, areas of improvement, we'll say. And so, first part, how do you kind of talk the business owner off the ledge, so to speak, when, they want to get out now, but they're just not ready? Like, how do you have that initial conversation?
Well, they want to get out now because they're feeling some urgency, right? So whatever the reason that they want to get out, right? And I think it's about, to me, it's always about education, right? Because in our world, in the M&A world, we live on getting a business buyer ready, taking it to market, getting valuations, deal terms. It just kind of flies off of our tongue, right? Like, hey, this is the world we're living in. But I think you have to really pay attention to the people that don't come from this world, right? And then they're trying to sell their business.
Right.
And so what we find is the way they're operating the business is great, but it's not buyer ready, right? And that's where we came up with our own framework within RBA, and we kind of educate our clients and put them through this process. And when we come out on the other side, those outcomes are really good.
What does that process look like? You know, take high level, like the things you're doing, the steps you take, the work that you guys are putting in.
Yeah. So the first thing that we do is actually find out what their number is and what the exit looks like and what success looks like for our customer. That's the first part of my framework, right? Because otherwise the answer is always more. Right? You know, we've all been there, right? If we don't know what enough is, then the answer becomes more. So the first thing you got to do is say, what is enough, right? Where do you want to be? And then we reverse engineer it, basically, right? So we say, you know, you want to, let's just pick a number, $15 million exit, right? And say your business is now worth 10 million. How do we get there, right? And then we take 3 initiatives and we work on it. We meet with them every quarter. And we don't work on everything. There's a lot to be done, but we only pick the top 3. And then we put 5 initiatives under each one of those objectives. And then we work on it for a whole year or 2 years. Okay. And then when it's ready, it's ready. And then we go. And that's how we do it. And what we find is really interesting. People may come to us burnt out and say, I want to sell today. But if I give them a plan for like 18 months and just say, hey, this is a short-term plan. This is not a 50-year plan or a 30-year plan. This is a short-term plan. There's huge benefits to you and your family by getting your business ready, getting it buyer ready, going through my framework. You'll see that a lot of the owners get a second wind in their sail and they're actually buckle down and do it. Mm-hmm. I think psychologically it's very helpful to put a very short-term, you know, 2-year limit on it. So what we do is we've learned early on that using time, a very compressed time, is actually a great tool to use to increase the value of your company and get it buyer ready.
And why is that?
Because time, I've thought about this long and hard. And you've also seen it in private equity exits, right? 4-year exits, sometimes 3-year exits. And you kind of look at that and you're kind of like, wow, you know, they created $100 million in value over a very short period of time. And I have my own conclusions on it. And I think the easiest way I can say this is I think when you have very compressed timetables, 2 things happen. All of the second tier and the third tier things that you think you should do fall off. You only focused on the most important because you don't have time for the everything else, right? Second is I think when you compress a time limit, I think your brain and your company starts to do and find new ways to achieve these goals. So it's not the same old. It's not like I'm doing 10 jobs a day and now I'm going to do 12. You can't, right? You got to figure out the way to do 20. And that requires new solutions, innovative thinking, new risks that an owner's got to take, new ways of looking at the business, new ways of looking at the bottlenecks in a business, new ways of looking at the talent you got on your team. So when you compress it, it gives you a completely new lens on your business. Mm-hmm. And in many ways, I would argue that probably that's the only way to grow it. I'm convinced that these little 5% growth is like watching paint dry. I've never seen anybody do it consistently over time.
Yeah. So almost take these little sprints and just focus on this period of time. Like you said, these 3 objectives. And I was going to ask why only 3, but now hearing your answer, like that's all you really have time for.
It forces you to decide.
It forces you to decide, work on the important things, but also really to dive into those 3 things as opposed to spreading yourself thin over 10 things.
Correct. And most owners think, and most founders think, for you to scale at whatever level, whether you're scaling to grow your business, you're scaling to exit, you're scaling to get it ready for a PE firm to come buy you out, you know, whatever these goals are, the general tendency is I got to do more. And what we've learned from almost 20 years of data and looking at companies that are scaled, hyperscalers in our industry and sold and exited, is it's almost the opposite. Okay, the ones that are scaling fast are doing fewer things than the ones that are not scaling.
Right. Well, it's like it's how you go about your day, like in your work environment. You know, I've found that you can just get lost in all the things that are going in your head because you have all these things you need to do, you want to do. You can only do one thing at a time. And until you do that one thing, you can't get to, 2 or 3. and you just kind of just this loss of like, overthinking things and not getting anything accomplished.
Right. Right. Analyze, paralyze, right? So I think a lot of
That,
times, you put together great plans and plans don't increase the value of your business. It's action and
yep.
results that do. And I feel, there's the 80-20 principle that we've all heard of. I feel like it's so true in business. Like you just got to pick the 20% of the actions that's going to give you the 80%. And what that's going to do is help you choose. And you've got to learn to say no to number 3 or number 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 on that list. And when we get our founders to focus on just the top 3, we find phenomenal outcomes for them within a couple of years. And that's where this whole consulting first approach started.
Yeah. How do you come to the 3 things? I know that's a tough question because it's on a case by case, but you're looking at 3 things. Like, how do you get to those 3 things?
You just ask the owner. And what I do is, you do March Madness brackets.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. So it's a very simple exercise that we do with the owner. And they don't even know we're doing it, but we're doing it. I just have brackets. I have about 8 brackets. Okay. And we'll name about 8 things that we got to do to grow from, let's use the same example of 10 to 15 million. And then I'll make the owner play the brackets. And then we come to our last 3. And that's the way.
That's amazing. I love that approach. It's so simple, but very, very impactful, I would think.
Yeah, we'll just pick, hey, between 7 and 8, which one is more important? 7.
Yeah.
Okay, that flows. And then you go now between 5 and 6, what's important? 5. Great. So now between 5 and 7, what's important? 7. Okay, so now slowly it'll make our clients think through this process, and you're making these micro decisions. But what happens when you get to the end of that? Okay, you have your top 3.
Yeah, I love that approach. That's very interesting.
Yeah, and sometimes you'll see owners stick in a bracket for like a whole day.
Yeah,
Because they wouldn't be able to irrefutably say, this is what I want to choose. They're picking. And finally you say, you got to pick one. And in their gut, they know where to go with it. And then we force them to go there.
I would imagine just the visualization of seeing those on a bracket kind of, gets them moving forward. Because like you said, you can just analyze things over and over again and never make a decision between the 2, but actually seeing it and moving it and maybe moving it back, moving the other one forward. I just think, and that's how I do my bracket. So I love seeing it and looking at it holistically. Like, no, I got to move this one. I got to move that one.
Yeah, it's very old fashioned. I just do it on a piece of paper. Like I have this electronic notebook that I can share on the screen. I can just scribble on it, right? And I just get the owner like I would you, and I'll say, okay, let's go play a game. And we just go through it.
That's amazing. I love it. I love it.
24% increase in valuation over 2 years when we do this with our clients.
24%. That's amazing.
That's the average. Some have doubled.
Yeah. Wow. And just to focus on a couple, I think that's the big takeaway. Focus on 3 things to help your client, increase the value over a 2-year period of time. Just that short little sprint of time, those 3 things, and make a huge difference.
I tell you what, even in our own firm, right? 5 years ago, we grew almost 300% in like 3.5 years. And then we plateaued. I made the mistake. Okay. I got into too many things, started doing too many marketing channels, lead gen channels, etc. Okay. And then when I go back and look at it, the number one mistake I did as an owner and as an entrepreneur is learning not to say no.
That's important.
And then about a year ago, I said, okay, so we got rid of all of our 9 marketing channels and sales lead gen channels. We zeroed it down to 3. Okay. And now we're starting to see the growth again. So in the last couple of quarters, we're starting to see the growth again. So it happens to everybody. I just think it's just recognizing it and then knowing that scaling is all about saying I would say scaling is more important to say no to things than to say yes to things when you want to scale. That's my own journey.
Yeah.
I've been a schmuck doing the same things, doing too many things.
It's very true though. I mean, you do a couple of things really well, or you do a lot of things poorly. Like what's better? And it's pretty obvious.
Correct. And I also think like as a company, you don't have to do everything well. I think every company's got its own DNA and its own strengths. And I think it's really important to just stick with it. This is, I think, maybe something that's plaguing us in the social media age. Every business guru over there has got something new and shiny, like it seems like every day.
Mhm.
A new hack, a new this, a new that, a new whatever.
Mhm.
I think at the end of the day, I think it's about going back to what got you from 0 to 60 and saying, okay, what's going to get me from 60 to 100 miles an hour, and looking at it in a very compressed time frame and doing it. A lot of times when we talk to our clients, it's not about finding something new. It's almost making them say no to everything that's not in their DNA and saying, okay, let's go.
I
We
gotta
got in trouble
imagine.
too, personally. I mean, I've been that guy 2 years ago. We tried all these different things, and then you figure out why you're so busy, but you're not scaling like you used to. And that's my own personal. That's what I learned. Yeah.
Yeah, practice what you preach, right? Don't do as I say, not as I do.
Hey,
Now do as I actually do.
I'm just saying, I've been that guy, and I'm learning also. We're all learning from each other.
No doubt. So, kind of transitioning to just the restoration is a very specialized industry. You guys are amazing at it. You're the go-to experts in that space. What makes businesses in this industry so different from others? Whether it's just maybe it's on valuation, deal structure, just things to know. What are some nuances about the restoration industry that make it unique?
It's really interesting. It's a very small industry. Okay, it's a niche, very small niche. A lot of people don't even know it exists. And I think like it's one of those industries that you don't know you need it until you need it,
Yep.
right? I mean, you don't know you need someone to come and dry out water in your kitchen until you came home from work one day and it's flooded. Correct. So it's a really interesting industry like that. Like people call you in very vulnerable days. They're having a really bad day when they're calling you, and I think it's a great industry where you can actually go and make a difference. I think it's really interesting. And you look at it even in huge scales. When you get storms in Florida, when you get fires in California. I mean, the way this industry mobilizes beyond the numbers. Let's leave the numbers alone for a minute. But the reason for existence, it really affects a lot of people and helps a lot of people. That's why I've been in it 20 years.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, you're just helping people in a vulnerable state and making hopefully their their situation day a little bit better.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So when you're working with, you know, business owners in this industry, I was, you say it's understanding the owner is as important is just as important, if not more, than understanding the business,
Yeah.
right? Can you elaborate on that and why that's so important?
Because I think like a lot of times we tend to think of business as like the, the one and done scenario. This is personal and it's going to be very counterintuitive uh, or counterculture, I can say. So I think I may get some text messages when I say this, but I think like business is a tool. Okay, it's a tool for your family. It's a tool for your community. It's a tool for the employees and partners you're working with, your customers, whatever, the entire ecosystem. It is not the end all. And so when I look at it, and I've done it in my own business, when I look at it, I always look at how does it fit in the culture, the goals, how is it serving the community? What's the moat around it? Yeah, what are the reviews around it? How embedded it is in the community? What are the branding? That's the kind of stuff, soft stuff that I'm always looking at. And when I talk to my clients, I'm always talking to it is it's a tool in your toolbox, and what purpose does it serve? And I think it's a very vulnerable, high level question, probing question to ask. Uh, you know, it's almost very similar to, hey, when you retire, what are you going to do?
You can only
Right?
golf for so long.
You can only golf for so long. Yes, yes. The happiest of retirees always have something to go to.
Right. Yep. Another passion, beyond
Yeah, you got to do something, right?
because
I
I
feel like
mean,
business has always got to be holistically. You got to look at it holistically,
mhm,
and I think when people look at it holistically, it's easier to see also whether you're the best shepherd of your business at the moment or not.
mhm,
I mean, how many owners are looking at the business, and me included, I've been guilty of this also. When I was running my home service business, yeah, it was fun when I was buying other companies and adding it on. It kind of felt like creative, and it's kind of what us M&A guys do. It's like crack, like you just want another acquisition and the next and the next, you know. But at some point, I was happy with where we are. And it took me a minute until a really good friend of mine confronted me about this and said, hey, you're happy, but what about your employees? And that's the holistic way in which you got to look at it, right? And then you
yeah,
look at it and say, well, it served my purpose. It no longer fits me, but it also is hurting my employees now. It needs a different shepherd. Am I being the best shepherd of my business? And for me, it wasn't. So I exited.
Yeah.
So you got
That's
to
and
look at it holistically, I think.
that takes a strong person to be able to look in the mirror and say, "Yep, I'm not the right person. I need to move on." Because and with the generation that's coming through, the pike with all these businesses coming to sale eventually now and in the future, how do you handle those? Because as that, the baby boomers, they have, historically been a generation that's their identity is their business.
Yeah.
They're staying in it a lot longer than other generations. And so talk about the holistic approach. This generation is kind of the opposite of that. Like their business is their identity and vice versa. So how do you have that conversation?
So I think the conversation really is, are you being the best shepherd of your business or not? I think that it's a very deep conversation. You're going to be sitting in your truck or in your car thinking about that for quite a long time, right? And then the question really becomes, if you're not the best shepherd of your employees and your business and your customers, the right thing to do is to find someone that is. Because I think like everyone remembers when you're 30 or 35 years old and you're trying to get your career going, you're trying to take care of your family, you're trying to scale, you're trying to, do all these things. And I think it's really important to reflect and think about when you were in that stage of your career, right?
Absolutely.
So that's the question that I always ask all my clients is,
Mhm.
if you still have the juice and you feel you're the best guy to run the business today, by all means, keep doing it.
Mhm.
I mean, we know owners that are in the 80s skipping to work every day and loving it,
Mhm.
but a lot of them are not. There are some people in the 40s and earlier, midlife that are burnt out. And I think you just got to keep reflecting constantly to make sure that you are shepherding the business and the employees to the best of your ability and not just running through the motions.
And would you agree that, in your space, that it's a very people driven business, a lot of loyal employees, customers? How do you account for that? Just the culture, the leadership transition, just the people in the business. How do you account for that because it's a big decision for a business owner to make,
Yep.
and there probably keeps them up at night. One thing that might keep them up at night is if I'm going to sell, how is the culture going to, transition to the new buyer? How are my employees going to, handle that and see that? So what are your thoughts on just transitioning the culture, the people to a new leadership?
Yeah, great question. All of us in our industry know when someone's calling us, the number one thing they're mainly concerned about is a number, right? Everybody needs to
Right.
get a number, right? What's the valuation of our business? But when you notice, and this is what I talk to my clients all the time, I said the number is going to be important for you for like 2 weeks. Once you're comfortable with the number and the deal terms, it's going to turn to culture and people. Okay. And I said, you better start thinking about this. And what I like to do is I always like to kind of bring it down to a very practical level, right? And what I would make my clients think about and actually write a letter to themselves and say, hey, post closing, you go select this buyer, and now you're 6 months out. Okay. And someone asks one of your managers, how is it to work for the new company? What do you think you want them to say? And that captures all of this mumbo jumbo about culture in like one paragraph, right? And I
Yep.
tell you, this is what we want them to say. Great.
Mhm.
So now when we take you to market, we're going to get our number. That's the least of our worries, right? It's a great business. Someone's going to pay a fair price for it. Now let's keep that paragraph that you wrote in front of you. And when you go talk to these 10 potential buyers, let's look at where the best match is going to be. And that's the way I do it. I do it as a very simple, like, hey, while I'm doing your sims and I'm doing your valuations and I'm getting ready to take you online, I need you to take an hour, go to Starbucks and go somewhere, grab a cup of coffee and a piece of paper and pretend it's now 3 months, 4 months post closing, and someone's asking one of your employees, hey, what is it like to work in the combined company? And what do you want them to say? Now that gives us clarity. And that's the way I like to preserve culture.
Yeah. That's a
Yeah.
very
That's why I help my clients pick the right buyer from the cultural
based
lens.
on that.
Just write a simple paragraph and just keep it in front of you.
Yeah, that's simple but impactful, I think.
Well, I think the idea of someone asking the employee, what is it like to work there? And
Yeah.
I think is a very probing question. And I
Mhm.
think for a lot of us who are not HR experts, who are running our business, that kind of brings it to a very practical term, and it takes all these HR theories and everything, and just kind of brings it to like one question. I've been using that for a long time.
Mhm. That's a great tool to use. I love that. I
Yeah,
love that.
yeah.
What else?
One more thing. When I started my company, I had three offers. Okay, my home service business, and I picked the one that was actually the lowest, not by a lot, but slightly lower.
Mhm.
Because when I asked him that question, how would you like your employees to talk about you a year from now? It was almost, I was going to say carbon copy, but I'd have dated myself. It was a copy very similar to what I had written.
Mhm.
You see what I'm coming? It was
Yep.
so similar.
Yep.
And that was 7 years ago. And that business has almost tripled since then. I mean, I still talk to the owners about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Got to make sure there's alignment there because, in a sale and as you advise your clients, you're not only, working for your client to sell the business now, but you're also finding a buyer that's going to be successful post sale.
I think there's two ways we can look at it as M&A folks, and kind of in the middle of the transaction, you can look at it as, hey, I'm getting a transaction done, and then my job is done at the closing table, and then, the other parties take it from there. I tend to be a little bit more old school in a way, I mean, I try my best, and I let a lot of my staff also, we try our best to make 2 + 2 is 5, right? And we're trying our best to do that. I think it's gratifying. It's a more gratifying career when you try to do that.
Absolutely.
You don't
Yes,
get
sir.
paid for it, but I think it's a lot more gratifying. I think it's better for your brand. I think it's better for your business when you don't get it right all the time because culture is tough to pin down, you
Yep.
know. But I think if we can go to sleep at night knowing that we tried our best, I think it's more gratifying.
No doubt. No doubt. What other inside information can you give us about the restoration industry that is maybe a little bit more unique? If let's say I got this opportunity in the restoration space, I've never done a deal in this space. Like, what are the top 1 to 3 things I should know about?
I think, know that they're contractors, okay? And you got to investigate the accounting system and revenue recognition. That's the finance side of it,
Hmm.
okay? And I think, we are in a business of catastrophes also. And I think you really got to watch out for, is it a non-recurring revenue, like it's a big storm and you just go build, 50 million on a storm, or whether it's recurring revenue. Those are the two things that I would really look out for.
Is recurring revenue not common, or is it common
It's
in
very
those?
common. So people look at our industry, and there are a few companies in the industry that are designed to go deal with fires in California, and then 6 months later go to Florida and do hurricanes, and then go up north and do the storms. Those revenues are very lumpy, and that's what you got to look out for. Most of our industry is serving a local market, and
Mhm.
they seem to be a lot more evened out as far as revenue goes.
Awesome.
Yep.
What does the buyer's appetite look like? Is it private equity interested, more strategics? What does that space look like?
Yeah, so there's some roll-ups going on, strategic roll-ups going on in our industry. Private equity is, it was kind of one of those boring industries until about 6 years ago. And, Blackstone bought out Serpro, and that made news. It was the biggest acquisition in our industry. And that really opened, and I think a lot of people got aware of our industry. And so now you're seeing a lot of private equity groups coming from adjacent markets, from home services, the mechanicals, your HVAC plumbing, roll up private equity groups getting into restoration, and that trend is going to continue. It's accelerating, and I think it'll continue for the next 5 years at least.
And you and I were talking the other, I think it was last week or whatever, about just roofing as well, being an
Yep.
adjacent industry that's really getting into the restoration space.
Yeah, it's already happening, and uh, it's part of the building, right? So
Right.
it's just natural for those two industries to kind of start merging together.
No doubt. What does the next 3 to 5 years look like? Take out your crystal ball. What does it look like for the space? Where are we going to be? And what's activity look like? All that sort of good stuff.
Activity was pretty euphoric in 2020 through 23. I personally didn't like it. Okay, it was just getting. Let me just say it. It was getting ridiculous. I tried to look one way to say it, but there isn't. 2024, 25 is coming back to normal. I think this is really healthy for our industry. I think this trend will continue for the next 5 years. I think it's we had a blip up during COVID. I think it's coming back, it's normalizing. And I think the normal trends, the long-term trends are looking amazing for our industry.
Mm-hmm.
New private equities coming in, revenue is good. These are healthy businesses to own over time. So I think it's a good market.
It's an industry of need.
It's an industry of need. Emergency, it's an emergency service.
Yeah. You hope you don't need it. Like I said, it's an industry you need it when you need it.
Yeah.
You hope you don't. Gokul, this has been amazing. Where can our listeners learn more about you, RBA, the great work that you're doing in the restoration space, all that good stuff?
Yeah, very simple. Everything's on our website. You can get up there. There's all these forms where you can touch base with us. www.rbacells, as in SELLS.com. Everything's there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your wealth of information, great insights. I love the way you're going about this and some tips and tricks on how you can take whatever you're doing in this space and apply it to other industries. And so I know I learned a couple of things that I know our listeners will enjoy this and hopefully put into practice a couple of those tips and tricks. So thank you for joining the show today. That's our episode for this stuff. Make sure to like, share, comment. Share this episode with anybody you think might benefit from our conversation. Go check out all of our episodes at cornerstoneia.com/podcast. Tune in every week, every Thursday morning. And until next time, everybody, take care. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the M&A Mastermind podcast. And a special thank you to our presenting sponsor, Cornerstone International Alliance. If you enjoyed today's discussion, don't forget to like, share, and comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. We'll be back next week with more insights, strategies, and real-life experiences to help you take your M&A game to the next level.